Right, so hello everybody. My name is Josh. Today's gonna be kind of a interesting video. I haven't really made a video in a while, right? But I got some inspiration because I don't know, I saw this new video. Well, actually, that's not really my inspiration. My inspiration was essentially I had a conversation for the first time with my family, right? And for the first time I felt like I actually in this is gonna sound horrible, like enjoyed the conversation, right? And I was like learning stuff actively, and not just learning things that like they wanted me to know, but it was along the lines of they were talking about something, and through this narrative, there were specific parts of it that I was interested in. Stuff's kind of cool. I really enjoy it. I didn't know that I could have conversation like this, right? And I know that sounds outlandish, right? Like I feel like a lot of people um are gonna say that the stuff I talk about is just common sense, right? Like why should you not know this, right? Like why are you surprised about this, right? Like this is just how conversation is, right? Like this is why conversation is enjoyable, and I'm just like I'm picking up bits and pieces now, from just experience, right? Even if I'm not the smartest and everything, right? I feel like I'm learning a lot of new things, even if it's again obvious to a lot of people, right? So with that out of the way, right? I know that was like a long, like what I mean, like I'm speaking like a like I'm a submachine gun, right? Um, I want to talk about like four things that I really learned, like I was analyzing the conversation because essentially what happened was I really like these conversations. How do I replicate that in almost all interactions, right? And I haven't got, I've gotten, I'm not fully there yet, right? And I'm sure that there's a whole field of study that is dedicated to this. I have no idea what it is, but it doesn't really matter. I'm taking my experiences and I'm framing them in a way that I can understand and reference, right? So it's gonna sound scientific, right? Um, and stuff. But anyway, so this is my principles of conversation. It sounds super boring, right? But I'm gonna give you essentially I'm gonna give you the definition that I came up with. Me and ChatGPT 4 came up with, right? I described the idea and I had it spit out a really scientific definition. I'm gonna give that to you, and then I'm just gonna break it down, explain what it actually means. Like, what are we actually talking about, right? Without the big terminology, the funny words, all that stuff. And it's mostly honestly just a video for me, right? This is my principles of conversation, right? There's only four right now, and I really like it, right? One name I'm not too fond of, but we're gonna see how this goes, right? So I hope you guys enjoy, and let's go. I'm gonna share my screen with you. All right, I think that's good. I think it's good, right? So, principles of conversation, like I said before, right? So the first one, we're just gonna get right into it. It's called targeted inquiry, right? So this is the broad definition. This is the first paragraph, right? So a communication principle that posits the effectiveness of using targeted inquiries in casual conversations to deepen engagement. This principle is characterized by the focus on specific words or phrases emphasized by a speaker, prompting questions that encourage the speaker to elaborate on their thoughts or experiences. TI underscores the role of active listening and responsive questioning in fostering more meaningful and personal interactions. Now, below that, I have a little blurb. What are we talking about, right? So, this is the idea that if you pay close attention to what somebody emphasizes in casual conversation and ask specific questions about it, you'll end up having a much deeper and more interesting conversation. It's about picking up on the little details they seem to care about and showing you're really listening, right? And we have a practical application. So Jake is chatting with his neighbor Sarah about her weekend. So I went hiking. It was quite an adventure. We even had a bit of a scare when we thought we were lost. And then Jake kind of prompts, he's like, "Oh, cool, right? But what do you mean by a bit of a scare, right?" So essentially, taking this essentially like I want to say people say things a lot where they'll take a whole event and they'll summarize it in a really ambiguous way or a really concise way, almost too concise, right? Like Sarah says, we even had a bit of a scare when we were lost, right? But she doesn't describe how they got lost and elaborate on that, right? How they found their way out of it, right? Um, a real life example. This when I was talking to somebody else, right? Was they were telling me a story about some mischief that they were doing and that they got caught by the police in the end, right? And I was like, okay, what do you mean by caught though, right? Because if you think about it, right, being caught by the police is a whole event, right? it can open up a whole nother realm of possibilities and conversation. So I asked him, like, okay, so I get you're caught by the police, but like, what do you mean? Like, how did you get caught? Like, how did you know that they, did somebody rat you out? Like, who called them? Stuff like that. Or another thing was this same person set off a firecracker, uh, and they touched it with their finger. The finger blackened, and then they said that they emphasized that their mother didn't know about it because they would have killed them, right? And but then I asked him, like, well, what do you mean? Like, how'd you keep that from your mother? Your finger's literally black, right? Like it's super charred on the end. How are you gonna keep that from your mother? And they were talking about how what they said to their mother, and how it worked, and how like they all that stuff, and it was very interesting, right? And not only is it interesting, um it shows the other person that you're taking an interest in it, right? And it fosters like a big connection because people love to talk about themselves, right? I love to talk about myself. You love to talk about yourself. Everybody likes to talk about themselves, right? Because that's the most important part in anybody's life. The most important part in anybody's life is themselves, right? Like, because if they're gone, then there's no life for them, right? They're gone, right? So very interesting. I really like it. What is next? Constructive intermission. Okay. So this is something I kind of struggle with a little bit because um sometimes I link it with maybe like awkwardness or something like that. But let's read the definition, right? So constructive intermission, a theoretical framework in interpersonal communication that emphasizes the importance of allowing a strategic pause or intermission following a tense or uncomfortable conversation. CI suggests that providing time and space before revisiting a contentious topic can lead to a more constructive and respectful subsequent interactions, right? So essentially what this is saying, right, is let's say that there is something like, let's say you're doing targeted inquiry, right? And that world that opens up is sad. Let's say it had a very profound emotional impact on the speaker, perhaps so much so that they don't even want to talk about it, right? Or maybe they see your inquiry as insensitive. See it as insensitive. Maybe they ask you, why would you say that? Or why would you ask that, right? Um, and this is all about trying to take emotion as much out of it as possible because emotion is what really, I mean, we are creatures of emotion, in my opinion, right? Or that is what the evidence has led me to believe, right? That's the natural conclusion I've come to, that we are creatures of emotions. We act primarily on emotions. If you have emotion in a if you have an emotionally charged conversation, um things can get a bit shaky. It depends a lot of the time, but I think the best thing to do a lot of the time is just to create distance, right? So let's look at the practical example, right? So that's essentially what it's saying, right? If you have uncomfortable interaction, right, you could essentially say, listen, um I could see that it's okay if you don't want to talk about it, right? I understand that. um could we talk about this on another occasion, right? If it's something really important, right? If it's not something super important, then you could just be like, I'm sorry, and then what I would say, I would be like, listen, it depends on the vibe and who the person is. Like if they're like an old person, right? Like if they're much older than me, right? Or something like that. I would probably wouldn't say this, but I would be like, usually, if you need anybody to talk to, right? If you ever want just somebody to listen, I'm here. You know what I mean? Just offering them that. You know what I mean? Showing that you're sympathetic and you can empathize with them, right? So let's look at the practical application. Emily, a young professional, has a disagreement with her coworker Mark over a project at work. Example of if tensions happening, right? It's in work, right? Because work has human relations. Naturally, emotions are going to get involved, especially because a lot of work is stressful, right? Like that's the point of it. Nobody, it's the jobs that a lot of people don't really want to do, right? And you want to make it as comfortable as it can be, right? Especially if that job's important to you. Emily has an opinion. I think we should approach the project differently. Mark says, no, I think my way is better. We should stick to the original plan. Emily says, I understand your perspective, but I feel we're not considering all options, right? And Mark starts to become defensive. let's just do it my way. I don't want to argue about this, right? So he's just shutting her down. He's shutting it down. He's like, listen, I essentially don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't care about the other options. My way's the best, right? And he could be like that for a variety of reasons. But the most important thing is that he's getting defensive, right? So she senses this and decides not to push further. She suggests revisiting the conversation in a couple days. When they meet again, Mark is more open to discussion and they collaboratively find a solution that combines their ideas. So that's really good because when they talk about it again, right? Let's say that it could maybe offer a separate situation. Maybe you could change the setting, right? Maybe being at work is really stressful for Mark, right? And if you really care about Mark, you really care about this job, right? Putting that effort in, it's not just about putting effort in the right places. To be like, hey, you want to, we can talk about this another time, maybe during a break, maybe during a day. I mean, a day where he's feeling better, right? So that you take emotion out of that and you find the best way to do this. And it doesn't have to be days, right? It could be an hour or two, right? That's something you have to agree on, right? So, I'm not gonna do these bottom two over here because I feel like the video is already getting long, right? I'm not gonna have a 30-minute video right now. So if you enjoy it, I will do more, right? I'll do so we targeted inquiry and constructive intermission. I will then cover motivational and mechanistic inquiry, MMI, and then depth exploration trigger, which I don't even like the name of that, but I couldn't find a better name like that, right? But this is probably one of my favorites, DET. I love it, but that depends if y'all like it, right? So I hope you enjoy it. Again, this is more for like me, right? Just talking about these ideas because these are stuff that I really want to improve, right? And stuff I really want to drill in my head, right? And if somebody finds value out of it, then all the better, right? Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.